A dance style is preserved and further developed by researching and documenting its oral tradition, publishing books on its origin, development and revival, and performing to audiences and teaching dedicated to students. Unlike in the visual arts, where dance is featured in an unconscious manner, written texts are the only authentic documentary evidence describing the prevalent dance techniques to an extent, dance activities in society, and dance practices. Sometimes this literature comes to us as textual guides or instructions manuals for dancers detailing different aspects of techniques and performances, sometimes as interesting stories about dancers and their lives, as well as in the form of poems and songs that have been adapted by dancers and choreographers to dance to, and at other times in the accounts of travelers visiting different parts of India and their descriptions of dancers or performances they have seen and been affected by. When one examines the different kinds of literature, general as well as specific to the performing arts, that was written over the centuries, one finds numerous references to dance theory, dance practices and dancers. Panini's Natasutra and Ashtadhyayi, traced back to approximately 200 CE, predates even the Natya Shastra, the most comprehensive of texts on the performing arts of India. Literary references to dance are available from the 1st century BC. For example, the Hathi Gumpha inscription of Kharavel, king of Orissa, dated end of 1st century BC, refers to him as a proficient in Gandharva Veda. Samudragupta's famous victory inscription at Allahabad, about 330 to 375 AD, describes him as surpassing Narada and Tumbru in Gandharva and Lalita. If one views literature as providing the content for dance, the history of dance development in India is divided into two periods. The first period is from 2nd century BC to 9th century AD, and the second from 10th, 11th century AD to 18th century AD, as mentioned in Indian classical dance by Kapila Vatsyayan. In the first period, Sanskrit exercised a firm hold on the intellectual life of the people. Its rich literature endowed the development of all arts in the country with unity and continuity. The first period also seemed to have upheld the Natya Shastra tenets of dance, music and dramatics as being integral to each other, where the poet and the dramatist were equally well versed in the technical intricacies of the dance. The second period saw a marked development of regional styles, but including Natya Shastra, most of the technical treatises on dance have described movements of individual limbs, that is Drishti Bheda, Griva Bheda, Pada Bheda, Hasta Mudras and the like. Some combinations of the individual limbs like Charis, Sthanakas, Rechakas, etc. and 108 movements or phrases, Karanas. The few later texts describe briefly the evolving prevalent contemporary dances, that is Lasyangas or Perini Nrityas and such. These all are basically permutations and combinations of individual movements of limbs. One has the freedom to create at once creative best using this vast grammar. But here is also almost no detailed record of any specific dance numbers, styles. So perhaps the idea was to allow each generation one's own dance to be time, space, culture specific. Classical music and dance in India had a well developed theoretical and practical system right from the ancient times. There has been various books and treatises on music and dance. They deal with all facets of dance and music, right from dress, makeup, background, stage, stage conditions, voice, instruments, qualities required for artists, teachers, rasikas, and so on. The books are called Lakshana Granthas, Lakshana meaning aspects and the Granthas meaning the treatises. The Lakshana Granthas provide the basics for the structural framework relating to the classical music and dance. The fact that dance and music have maintained their classicism over the ages is proof enough for the importance and impact of Lakshana Granthas on the practical aspects of dance and music. There have been many literature and music and dance right from Vedic times. In fact, Vedas are the earliest literature available on music and dance. The Lakshana Granthas may be classified on the basis of period as Vedic literature till 9th century literature, then from Matanga's period 9th century to medieval 16th century, the modern period from 16th century till the present times. Dance records from travelogues, government reports, temple records, inscriptions, scholars and explorers who traveled to ancient India and even as recent as the 19th century have left behind their travelogues that describe the dancers and the dances that they have seen, the occasions on which dances have been performed, the social customs associated with dance activity, the difference in professional and folk dances, and sometimes the economic and political necessity for codes to support the dancers. Since dancing was clearly associated with temples, texts and manuals describing temple rituals offer important information on why and when dance was performed in the temples, its significance as a part of the temple ritual, how temple supported dancers and so on. Government reports and gazettes are also important documentary evidences of the legal status of the dancers in the regulations that applied to them. In 1867 AD, an Arab traveler, Abu Zaid al-Hasan, mentioned dancing girls attached to temples. Another traveler, Al-Bairuni, also probably from an Arab country, has referred to dancers performing in temples in his work. His interpretation of dancers in temples in North India, where he toured, is that they were revenue earners for the king as they were a major attraction in the city. This is mentioned by Edward C. in Sachau, 1879, The Chronology of Ancient Nations, London, William Allen and Company, volume 1st. A number of European travelers visited India from the 17th century onwards, writing travelogues describing what they saw and experienced. Among the first one was Tavernier, who extensively toured South India, especially the Deccan region. He interpreted dancing girls as an indirect source of revenue for the rulers. Liquor was taxed in these kingdoms and dancing girls promoted heavy consumption. He also observed that there were 20,000 dancers in this region, but he described them as courtesans with no connection to temples. This was written by Tavernier and mentioned in the translation by Ball in 1925. Fray Sebastian Manic also came here in this century and has recorded a Durga procession led by a vast troupe of dancing girls in his book. This is by Travels by Fray Manrique. Abbé Jean Antoine Dubois, a French missionary who traveled and worked in India from 1792 to 1823, has written about the singing and dancing in temples at fixed times and how every important temple had at least 10 to 12 Devadasis attached to it in his travel book, Hindu Manners, Customs and Ceremonies. He has written about a festival at Tirupati with a procession of Lord Venkateshwara, where the temple priest selected the most beautiful women from among those who had come to watch, to serve as new dancing girls in the temple. He has also described dancing at the Pongal festival of Tamil Nadu 300 years earlier. Marco Polo recorded during a visit to Malabar that the dances of the Devadasis were believed to encourage sexual union between gods and the goddesses, thus ensuing prosperity and good harvests. Another travel writer, Dr. Francis Hamilton Buchanan, who wrote Journey from Madras through Mysore, Canara and Malabar in 3 volumes in 1807, has observed therein that 2 important temples at Kanchipuram has about 100 dancing girls attached to them. A missionary, Amy Wilson Carmichael, described in her book Things as They Are in 1904 how Devadasis were carefully selected and how attractiveness was a prized characteristic. Robert Stivell, in his book A Forgotten Empire, that is Vijayanagar, published in 1900, describes a city and a pagoda, a temple, therein with an image of Ganesha. He recounts how women dance before the image and that the daughters of these women belong to the temple. He described the expensive lifestyle of these women. However, most importantly, he described that appeared to be a dancing school in the king's palace. There is a hall, he says, there is a hall where the king sends his women to be taught to dance. There are images seated on the elephant as well as those on the panels are all dancing women having little drums. The designs of these panels show the position at the end of dances in such a way that on each panel there is a dancer in the proper position at the end of the dance. This is to teach the women so that if they forget the position in which they have to remain when the dance is done, they may look at one of the panels where is the end of the dance. By that, they keep in mind what they have to do. At the end of the house, on the left hand, is a painted recess where the women cling on with their hands in order better to stretch and loosen their bodies and legs. There, they teach them to make the whole body supple in order to make their dancing more graceful. In the middle of the wall is a golden image of a woman with arms in the position which she occupies in the end of the dance. It is widely believed that probably the whole of the Natya Shastra was illustrated in the sculpture and imagery, and it is such a misfortune that this wonderful structure has not survived. However, in the Kalyana Mandapa of the famous Vithala Swami temple of Hampi, there is a throne platform profusely decorated with rich frieze at its base, representing various types of musicians, dancers and drummers performing before an appreciating king, probably the great Krishna Deva Raya. Reference to dance are found in James Todd's Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan, where he explores the tradition of extensive Krishna worship in the state and the association of dance with this worship. The mystic dance, the Rasa Mandala, and comparing it to the pyric dance or the fire dance of the Egyptians. In addition to the reports by travelers from foreign lands, there are numerous government reports and gazettes authentically note the happening in various parts of the country. As recently as in early 1900, there are local government reports that state that there were temple dancers in Assam, Madras and Jagannath temple of Orissa, but not in Bengal. Not in Bengal, Sindh, United Province of Gujarat. By 1932, when it was becoming quite clear that dancing in temples would no longer be legally allowed, the Journal of the Madras Music Academy, 1932 states, We all know that today, even in Pandharpur, daily worship is being done in the temple accompanied by Natyam, dance. Similarly, in Srirangam, during the 10 days preceding the Mukotai Ekadasi day, worship is generally accompanied by Natyam. This was given by P.G. Saunders, JMMA 1932, 122. The reality of the dancer in the temple continued in the actual fact over many centuries almost all over India until it was banned an act of law in the mid 20th century. Dancing in the temples and temple precincts has reappeared in the recent years when professional classical dancers participated in the dance festivals and other prestigious events held by the temple trusts, official tourism and cultural departments. Temple inscriptions provided undisputed social records of prevalent practices. One of the most important inscriptions in the 12th century inscription at Brihadeshwara temple in Tanjore records the event when the ruler Rajendra Chola ordered 400 dancers to be brought from nearby temples to be attached to the Tanjore temple. The inscription names all the temple, both Shaivite and Vaishnavite, that had dancers attached to them. This is from South Indian Inscriptions 1985, second part 259-60. An inscription dating to the reign of Kulottunga III, that is 1205 to 18, establishes that there was a timetable for the presentation of dance and the dancers took turns. The assignment of a fixed period in the day for every dancing girl to perform her service by turn in the temple. This is found in the state inscriptions of the Pudukkottai published in 1929. This is a 169th inscription. The word Nritya is found in the inscription as early as the 9th century. The Manne copper plate, 802 AD, mentions the word Nritya while referring to the subordinate of Rashtrakuta Govind III called Sri Vijaya, who made a grant to those engaged in the service of dancing and singing in the Jain Basadi at Manyapura. Vilasini Virachitra Nritya Gitavali Bali. This is dance terminologies, Hema Govinda Rajan, page 27. Manuals on temple rituals are rich source of dance and dance-related temple activities. P.V. Jagdish Iyer's book, South Indian Shrines, published in 1920 and the revised edition in 1922, describe dance as a ritual in temple. One such description in a temple in Rameshwaram records the ritual with accuracy. It says, at 4:30 or 5 a.m., the puja begins. The dancing girl, that is the Muraikari, officiating for the day with Rudraksha beads in place of jewels, dresses up as a Brahmani and her hair uncombed, open up all the doors to the Mahamandapa. Later, the god is taken in procession, preceded by musicians and attending dancing girls. The dancing girl repeats a Tevara Ujala and or verse in honor of Shiva. A number of these manuals also state the reason for which dance was performed in the temple. Such manuals form part of the literature or written available records. None of the manuals associate temple dancing with prostitution. While most of the text refer to dancing girls in temples as Ganikas, they were also known as Deva Ganikas, and there are instances where Deva Ganikas and Devadasis are the same. Literature used for dance, the dance Sahitya, performances of dance and dance dramas almost always require a story in verse in which the dance is performed. Dancers and choreographers, earlier Nattuvanars, have usually taken recourse to the extraordinary wealth of the existing Indian epics, Puranas and the legends from which to create and choreograph an item. Religious bhajans and bhakti poems have also been popular sources. As seen earlier, one of the most interesting features of Indian classical dance styles is its intrinsic relationship with literature. Language becomes an interesting tool to express different kinds of content through dance. The whole Margam repertoire of Bharatanatyam thus incorporates different lyrical styles having their own unique structure. In a country like India, with 28 states and 18 languages and with 7 styles of classical dance, it is just natural that every dance style, however close they may be, express the same content through different languages. Which takes us to the first point in exploring the relationship between dance and literature. As a Bharatanatyam dancer and teacher, Professor Parul Shah says, with Gujarati as a mother tongue, my whole perspective towards language and its literature has been full of interesting discoveries. The relevance of language for an Indian classical dancer is indeed inexplicable. Emotions are universal, but when they are packaged in a certain music style, say Carnatic music with South Indian languages as the base for Bharatanatyam dancer, it is expected and becomes a must for the dancer to learn that language. But which one? Tamil, Telugu, Kannada? Without really formally learning any of these, but just Sanskrit, the base of most Indian languages, is opened my eyes to the cultural uniqueness of each region. Over the years, very gradually, I discovered how every language is linked with the body language through dance. Thus, what a dancer virtually translates the lyrics into Angika is and should speak that particular language through that Angika. Just like every language has its own accent, I feel a dancer definitely develops that accent through dance, which has its roots in the language which he performs. It is not just the music, but the language intertwined in that music, which inspires virtually for a Bharatanatyam dancer. Thus, there would always be a difference between the dancer who is not aware of the language which he performs and a dancer who has studied the script and the accents of that language which he performs in. In a style like Bharatanatyam, the gesture becomes an important entity to visually translate the lines of the text. Just like any text has a literal meaning and a deeper meaning, the same is interpreted into dance. One of the songs written in Gujarati by my late guru Srimati Anjali Meher describes Khandita Nayika, one who chides the Nayaka for his infidelity. She is hurt, angered, but loves him and phrases through the whole gamut of experiences which are communicated through him. She says, Jaja Kana, Tuja Karani Jani, Nathire Sunavi Tuhi Vani. Kalanidhi Narayan, the doyen of Abhinaya, gives an interesting example of Khandita from a pada in Tamil which can give birth to various interpretations. A similar song is also danced in Tamil. The same Khandita is most famous from the Ashtapadi in Gita Govinda of Jayadeva. The meaning, go, that woman who pacifies you. Why are you here? The woman's house is not on the street. Go away. The interpretation of this one line can evoke all the states of emotions and bhava. Shungara, have you come to see me? Please come in, dear. But this is not her house. Hasya, are you drunk? Have you lost your way? This is not that woman's house. Raudra, do not dare to show your face here again. Get out. Karuna, poor thing. You have come to a wrong house. Her house is just down the other street. Veera, what do you take me for? I have self-respect. I can live quite independent of you. The door is there. Adbhuta, oh good gracious, have you come here? This is not the street where she lives. Bhaya, oh, you are angry. Please forgive me. But this is not the house you are searching for. And Bibhatsa, keep away. I don't want to even see your face, which is smeared with her kumkum. The text of the poem is to be fully comprehended by the dancer choreographer. It is interpreted at bhavartha, that is emotional content, padartha, that is the meaning of the song, and the shabdartha, the expression of each word of the song. Improvisations with the different metaphors and the appropriate hand gestures and postures bring out the ethos of the poetry, which is the outer expression of the culture. The whole thesis of Dr. Kapila Vatsyayan establishes the inner relationship of arts and especially that of dance and literature. Her major emphasis is on the dance text and their analysis of movements of body and the dance references found in Vedic, Puranic and other later literature. But the question to the dancer, teacher, choreographer is in handling the dance literature, where the literature is dominant and the dance is subsidiary, and where the literature could go hand in hand with the choreography. Where the literature is fully subsidiary to the dance choreography, we regard ourselves as dancers of the postmodern era. The past has seen purity of language through dance. The present, though reflects different possibilities, with the diversity in region slowly turning into more or less homogeneous society, there are primarily two questions ringing in the mind. One, is one able to express, convey and create dance that allow the freedom of expression using the traditional literature, whereas our life is absorbing so many streams of thoughts, information and feelings in so many ways. Two, does the audience of today understand the pure Sahitya used for classical dance? And three, would it be aesthetically incorrect and artistically blasphemous if we use the colloquial language for classical dance? We can also ask, is it the literature which helps the audience to understand the dance, or is it the intrinsic power of communication within the dancing body which helps them to relish dance, or is it the mix of both? As Martha Graham says, the body says what the words cannot. And Isadora Duncan has stated, if I could tell you what it meant, there would be no point in dancing it.